The autumn wind swept through the old church hall where the estate sale was being held, carrying with it the scent of aged paper and forgotten memories. 23-year-old Daniel Carter stood in the corner, clutching a faded green military jacket against his chest while his cousins gathered around the antique furniture and jewelry boxes, their voices filled with excitement over their inheritances. "Come on, Danny, you've got to be kidding me," his cousin Marcus said, barely containing his laughter. "Grandpa left you his old army coat? That thing probably smells like mothballs and regret." Daniel's cousin Jennifer joined in, shaking her head as she admired the pearl necklace she'd just claimed. "I mean, I got Grandma's jewelry collection, Marcus got the vintage car, and you got a ratty old jacket? Did Grandpa forget about you or something?" Their laughter echoed through the hall, drawing the attention of other family members who had gathered for the reading of their grandfather's will. Daniel felt his face flush with embarrassment, but he held the jacket tighter. His grandfather, Robert Carter, had passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 78. The funeral had been attended by dozens of people, many of them fellow veterans who spoke of Robert's character and service with a reverence Daniel had never fully understood. The executor of the estate, Mr. Thompson, a distinguished elderly gentleman with kind eyes, approached Daniel quietly. "Your grandfather was very specific about you receiving that jacket, young man. He made me promise to ensure you got it personally." "But why?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone else got valuable things. This is just an old coat." Mr. Thompson smiled gently. "Your grandfather told me you'd understand when the time was right. He also asked me to give you this." He handed Daniel a sealed envelope with his name written in his grandfather's shaky handwriting. Daniel stepped outside onto the church steps, away from the mocking voices of his relatives. The October air was crisp and cool, and he sat down on the stone steps, laying the jacket across his lap. It was heavier than he expected, the fabric worn but sturdy, with patches and insignias that spoke of military service. On the chest, he could make out a name tape that read, Carter, and various unit patches that he didn't recognize. He opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. His grandfather's handwriting, though trembling with age, was still legible. "My dear Daniel, if you're reading this, then I've moved on to join your grandmother. I know the others will question why I left you this jacket instead of something more conventionally valuable. The truth is, what I'm giving you is worth more than all the jewelry, furniture, and cars combined, but its value can't be measured in dollars. This jacket represents the most important year of my life, not because of what happened to me, but because of what I learned about humanity, sacrifice, and hope. Check the inside left pocket. There's something I've carried with me for 55 years, waiting for the right person to pass it on to. That person is you, Daniel. You've always had a kind heart and a desire to make the world better. I've watched you volunteer at the community center, help your neighbors, and treat everyone with dignity. You remind me of the young men I served with, the ones who believed in something bigger than themselves. Whatever you find in that pocket, know that it comes with a story and a responsibility. I trust you to understand both. With all my love, Grandpa Robert." Daniel's hands trembled as he picked up the jacket and felt along the inside lining. The left side had several pockets, and he carefully searched each one. In the deepest interior pocket, his fingers touched something wrapped in cloth. He pulled it out carefully and unwrapped what appeared to be a weathered leather pouch, tied with a faded ribbon. Inside the pouch were several items. A small, worn photograph of 5 young soldiers standing together in combat gear, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling despite the jungle backdrop behind them. Behind the photo were several handwritten letters on thin paper, a military dog tag that didn't bear his grandfather's name, a small wooden carving of a bird, and a folded piece of paper that looked like it had been opened and refolded hundreds of times. Daniel heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Mr. Thompson standing in the doorway. "May I join you?" the executor asked. "Please," Daniel said, grateful for the company. Mr. Thompson sat down beside him and glanced at the items spread across Daniel's lap. "Your grandfather and I served together in Vietnam. We were in the same unit. I'm one of the 5 men in that photograph." Daniel looked at the old photo with new eyes, trying to imagine Mr. Thompson as the young soldier grinning in the jungle. "You were there with him?" I was. And I know the story of everything in that pouch. Your grandfather asked me to help you understand if you needed it, but he hoped the letters would speak for themselves. Mr. Thompson pointed to the unfolded paper. Start with that one. It's the key to everything else. Daniel carefully unfolded the paper. It was a letter written in different handwriting than his grandfather's, dated April 15, 1970. Dear Robert, you saved my life yesterday, but more than that, you showed me that even in the darkest places, human kindness can shine through. When I was wounded and everyone said to leave me behind because the enemy was closing in, you refused. You carried me 2 miles through that jungle, talking to me the whole time, telling me about your family, your dreams, making me promise to survive because the world needed good people in it. I'm being evacuated tomorrow, heading home. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery thanks to you getting me out quickly. I'm writing this to thank you, but also to make you a promise. When I get home, I'm going to live the kind of life that honors your sacrifice. I'm going to be the man you believed I could be. I'm going to help people the way you helped me. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again, but I want you to know that you changed my life. Your friend, Michael Chen. Daniel looked up at Mr. Thompson, questions filling his eyes. Michael Chen was a medic in our unit, Mr. Thompson explained. He was hit during an ambush. The situation was bad, Daniel. We were outnumbered, low on ammunition, and the enemy was advancing. The tactical decision would have been to retreat and leave the wounded. But your grandfather refused. He picked Michael up and carried him through enemy territory while the rest of us provided cover. It took hours. By the time we made it to the extraction point, your grandfather had been grazed by bullets twice and was completely exhausted. But Michael was alive. What happened to him? Daniel asked. That's where the rest of the items come in. Look at the other letters. Daniel sorted through the thin papers and found several more letters, each dated months apart, all from Michael Chen. They chronicled his recovery, his return home to California, his decision to go to medical school to become a doctor. Each letter thanked Robert again and updated him on Michael's life. The final letter was dated June 1998, nearly 30 years later. Dear Robert, I'm writing to you after so many years to tell you that I just performed my 10,000th surgery. I became a cardiac surgeon, as you know, and I've spent my career saving lives. But every single time I step into an operating room, I think about that day in the jungle when you refused to give up on me. Every life I save is a tribute to your courage and compassion. I've trained dozens of young doctors, and I tell them all the same thing. Medicine is about more than skill, it's about believing every life is worth saving. That's what you taught me. You've probably saved more lives than you can imagine because you saved mine first. Your friend always, Michael. Daniel felt tears welling in his eyes. Did they stay in touch? Mr. Thompson nodded. They did. Michael and your grandfather wrote to each other for decades. When Michael retired from surgery at age 70, he came to visit your grandfather. That's when he gave Robert the wooden bird carving. It's a phoenix, carved by Michael's grandfather. Michael said it represented rebirth, second chances, and the belief that we can rise from our darkest moments. Daniel picked up the small wooden phoenix, feeling the smooth curves created by careful hands decades ago. And the dog tag? That belonged to another soldier in our unit, Private James Morrison. He didn't make it home, Daniel. He was the one who provided covering fire that allowed your grandfather to get Michael to safety. In his final moments, James asked your grandfather to keep his dog tag and to remember him. Your grandfather wore that tag alongside his own for the rest of his life. The weight of these stories settled over Daniel like a blanket. He looked at the photograph again, studying each young face. Which one was James? Mr. Thompson pointed to a tall, thin soldier with a wide smile on the far right of the photo. That's James. He was 19 years old, loved basketball, and wanted to be a teacher when he got home. He was the bravest person I've ever known. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. My grandfather never talked about the war. I asked him once when I was in high school, and he just said it was a long time ago and changed the subject. Robert carried a lot of pain from that time, Mr. Thompson said softly. But he also carried lessons and responsibilities. He believed that James's sacrifice and Michael's survival had to mean something. So he lived his life trying to honor both of them by being a good man, by helping others, by raising his family with love and integrity. At that moment, Marcus and Jennifer emerged from the church, still laughing about something. They stopped short when they saw Daniel sitting on the steps with items spread around him, tears on his face, and Mr. Thompson beside him. "What's going on?" Jennifer asked, her tone shifting from mockery to concern. Daniel looked up at his cousins, and in that moment, he made a decision. He could keep this story private, let them continue thinking he'd gotten the worthless inheritance, or he could share the truth about their grandfather's legacy. "Come sit down," he said quietly. "I want to tell you about what Grandpa actually left me." Marcus and Jennifer exchanged glances but moved closer. Other family members, noticing the gathering, began to drift out of the church hall. Daniel's Aunt Sarah, his father's sister, was among them. "What's this about, Danny?" she asked, using the childhood nickname she'd called him since he was small. "It's about the jacket," Daniel said, his voice stronger now. "And about Grandpa. And about why this matters more than any of us realized." He held up the photograph first. "This is Grandpa in Vietnam with his unit. The man on the right is Private James Morrison. He was 19 years old and loved basketball. He wanted to be a teacher." Daniel paused, letting that sink in. He didn't come home. He provided covering fire during an ambush so Grandpa could save a wounded soldier. This is his dog tag. Grandpa wore it for 55 years to remember him and honor his sacrifice. The laughter had completely disappeared from Marcus's face. Jennifer sat down on the steps, her pearl necklace suddenly seeming less important. Daniel continued, reading portions of Michael Chen's letters aloud, explaining how his grandfather had carried a wounded man 2 miles through enemy territory, how that single act of compassion had rippled outward, affecting thousands of lives as Michael became a surgeon and saved countless patients over his career. Aunt Sarah was crying openly. "I never knew. Dad never talked about it. He would sometimes wake up from nightmares and Mom would comfort him, but he never explained what happened over there. He carried the weight of it privately," Mr. Thompson said. "But he wanted the younger generation to understand the lessons he learned. That's why he left this jacket and these items to Daniel." Marcus stood up and walked over to Daniel, looking ashamed. "I'm sorry, man. I was a complete jerk. I had no idea." "None of us did," Jennifer added. "Grandpa was always so quiet about his past. We just saw him as this gentle old man who told bad jokes and made the best pancakes." "He was that," Daniel said, wiping his eyes. "But he was also incredibly brave and compassionate. And he wanted us to know that the most valuable inheritances aren't things you can sell or spend. They're the values we carry forward, the lessons we learn, and the responsibility we have to honor those who came before us." Over the next hour, the entire extended family gathered on those church steps as Daniel shared everything in the jacket's pocket. They passed around the photograph, read the letters, and held the wooden phoenix. Each item became a window into a part of their grandfather's life they'd never known existed. Uncle Richard, Robert's youngest son and Daniel's uncle, spoke up with a trembling voice. "Dad used to volunteer at the Veterans Hospital every week. He never missed a single Wednesday for 30 years. I always thought it was just a hobby, something to keep him busy after retirement. Now I understand. He was honoring his promise to James and to Michael to live a life of service." "And the scholarship fund," Aunt Sarah added, suddenly making connections. "Dad set up a scholarship for low-income students to attend medical school. He never explained why, just said education was important. But now it makes sense. He was paying forward what Michael did, helping create more doctors who could save lives." Daniel felt overwhelmed by these revelations. His grandfather's quiet life had been filled with purpose and meaning that he'd never advertised or bragged about. The jacket and its contents were breadcrumbs leading to a deeper understanding of the man Robert Carter had been. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "There's one more thing Robert wanted me to share with all of you. He recorded a video message a few months before he passed. He asked me to play it only after Daniel opened the jacket's pocket. If you'll all come back inside, I have a laptop set up." The family filed back into the church hall and gathered around as Mr. Thompson opened his computer. Robert Carter's face appeared on the screen, older and more frail than Daniel remembered from just months ago, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Hello, my dear family," Robert's recorded voice began. "If you're watching this, then Danny has opened the jacket and found what I left for him. I hope Mr. Thompson has helped explain the significance of those items. But I want to talk to all of you now about why this matters." Robert paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've lived a long life, longer than many of my friends from the war had the chance to. That's both a blessing and a responsibility. James Morrison never got to become the teacher he dreamed of being. Michael Chen became a surgeon only because someone refused to leave him behind. Every day I lived after that jungle was a gift, and I tried my best to honor that gift by being useful, by helping others, by raising you all to be good people." He leaned forward slightly, his expression intense. "The jacket I left to Danny isn't just fabric and thread. It's a symbol of the idea that what we do matters. How we treat people in their worst moments defines us. Whether we choose to leave others behind or carry them with us when it's difficult, that's what determines the kind of world we create." Robert smiled then, his face softening. "I know some of you wondered why I was so insistent on family dinners, on maintaining connections, on showing up for each other. It's because I learned in that jungle that we're all connected. When we save one person, we save everyone they touch. When we let someone fall, we lose not just them but all the good they might have done." He coughed lightly before continuing. "I gave Danny the jacket because I see in him the same quality I tried to cultivate in myself after the war, the belief that every person matters, that kindness is never wasted, and that the greatest inheritance we can leave isn't money or possessions but values and stories that inspire others to be better." Robert looked directly at the camera, as if he could see through time to this exact moment. "To all of you, I say this: don't measure your inheritance by its monetary value. Measure it by what it teaches you, what it inspires you to become, and how it connects you to something larger than yourself. Marcus, Jennifer, Sarah, Richard, and all the rest of you, the real inheritance I'm leaving you is each other and the responsibility to take care of one another the way I tried to take care of my brothers in Vietnam." He paused again, his voice growing softer. "And Danny, specifically to you, I'm entrusting the stories. Tell them. Share them. Make sure the next generation understands that heroism isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's just refusing to give up on someone when giving up would be easier. Sometimes it's carrying weight that others say is too heavy. Sometimes it's remembering those who can't be here and living in a way that honors their memory." Robert smiled one last time. "I love you all. Take care of each other. And Danny, the jacket is yours, but the lessons belong to everyone. Share them wisely." The video ended, leaving the family in profound silence. Daniel looked around at his relatives and saw tears on every face. The transformation was complete. What had started with mockery had become a moment of deep family connection and understanding. Jennifer stood up first and walked over to Daniel. She took off her pearl necklace and held it in her hands, looking at it thoughtfully. "These pearls are beautiful, and I'll treasure them because they were Grandma's. But you're right, Danny. What you got is worth so much more. I'm sorry I laughed." Marcus joined them, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I feel like I just met Grandpa for the first time, really met him. And I'm ashamed it took this long." Aunt Sarah hugged Daniel tightly. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you right now. You handled their mockery with grace, and now you're sharing his story with all of us. That's exactly the kind of person he was trying to raise all of you to be." Over the following days, Daniel worked with Mr. Thompson to research more about his grandfather's unit. They contacted military archives and connected with other veterans who had served with Robert. Each conversation revealed new layers to the story. They learned that Michael Chen had indeed become a renowned cardiac surgeon, that he'd written a book about medical ethics and compassion in healthcare, and that he credited Robert Carter in the dedication. Daniel also reached out to James Morrison's family. After some searching, he located James's sister, Patricia, now in her 70s, living in Oregon. When he called her and explained who he was, she wept on the phone. "Your grandfather wrote to me after James died," Patricia told him through tears. "He sent me James's dog tag and a beautiful letter about how brave my brother was, how much he meant to the unit, and how his sacrifice saved lives. That letter got me through the darkest time of my life. And your grandfather continued to write to me every year on James's birthday. Every single year for 55 years, I got a card from Robert Carter remembering my brother. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I didn't know that. He was a remarkable man, Patricia said. James loved him like a brother. Your grandfather promised my brother that he'd look after me, make sure I was okay. And he kept that promise for over 5 decades. When I went through my divorce, he sent me encouraging letters. When my kids were born, he sent gifts. When I lost my job during the recession, he sent me money, just a little note saying he knew James would want him to help. I tried to pay him back, but he refused. He said James had already paid it forward. This revelation led to more discoveries. Robert Carter had quietly helped dozens of people over the years, many connected to his military service, others simply people he encountered who needed assistance. He'd paid for strangers' groceries, helped young veterans find jobs, volunteered at homeless shelters, and donated anonymously to various causes. The local newspaper heard about the story and asked to interview Daniel. He was hesitant at first but realized that sharing his grandfather's story was exactly what Robert had asked him to do. The article, titled "The Jacket's Legacy: How One Veteran's Gift Taught a Family About True Value," resonated with readers across the region. Letters poured in from other families sharing their own stories of inherited items that carried deep meaning. Veterans contacted Daniel to share their experiences. Teachers requested permission to use the story in their classes to discuss values and service. The response was overwhelming and humbling. 3 months after the estate sale, Daniel organized a special event at the local community center. He invited his entire extended family, Mr. Thompson and other surviving members of his grandfather's unit, Patricia Morrison and James's other relatives, and representatives from Michael Chen's family, including Michael's daughter who was now a doctor herself, following in her father's footsteps. Daniel stood before the assembled crowd wearing his grandfather's jacket. It fit him perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for him. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. 3 months ago, I received what my cousins thought was the most worthless item in my grandfather's estate. An old, faded military jacket. They laughed at me, and honestly, I didn't blame them. It didn't look like much. He paused, meeting the eyes of various family members. But inside one of the pockets was a treasure beyond price. Not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable: stories, lessons, and connections that have completely changed how I understand my family, my grandfather, and what it means to live a meaningful life. Daniel shared the full story, from the letters to the dog tag to the wooden phoenix. He talked about James Morrison's sacrifice, Michael Chen's gratitude and subsequent careers saving lives, and Robert Carter's quiet dedication to honoring both men through decades of service to others. "My grandfather never bragged about any of this," Daniel continued. "He could have told us these stories, worn his heroism on his sleeve, but he chose instead to simply live those values every single day. He showed us that real strength isn't loud or boastful. It's consistent, compassionate, and committed to something larger than ourselves." He held up the jacket. "This jacket represents a choice we all face every day. Do we leave people behind when helping them is difficult, or do we carry them with us? Do we forget those who sacrificed for us, or do we honor them through our actions? Do we measure value in dollars and possessions, or in human connection and positive impact?" Daniel looked at Patricia Morrison, who was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Ms. Patricia, your brother James gave his life so others could survive. My grandfather wore his dog tag and wrote to you every year to ensure James's memory lived on. That's a sacred trust, and I want you to know that I'm committed to continuing it. James's story will not be forgotten." He turned to Dr. May Chen, Michael's daughter. "Dr. Chen, your father became a surgeon because my grandfather refused to leave him behind. Your father then saved thousands of lives, and you're continuing that legacy. That's the ripple effect of one act of compassion multiplied across generations." Dr. Chen stood up and approached Daniel. "May I say something?" "Of course." She addressed the crowd, her voice filled with emotion. "My father passed away 5 years ago, But before he died, he made me promise to find Robert Carter's family and tell them something. He said that every life he saved in the operating room, every student he taught, every person who benefited from his career, all of it traced back to a young soldier who refused to accept that some lives weren't worth saving. My father believed he owed your grandfather a debt he could never fully repay. But he tried, every single day, by being the kind of doctor who saw every patient as someone worth fighting for. She reached into her bag and pulled out a framed photograph. This is a picture of my father in his final year of life. He's standing in front of the hospital where he worked, and he's wearing his white coat. But look closely at his lapel. She showed the photograph to Daniel and the crowd. Pinned to Michael Chen's white coat was a small pin in the shape of a phoenix. He wore that every single day for 40 years, Dr. Chen said. It reminded him that he'd been given a second chance at life, and that second chance came with the responsibility to help others have their own second chances. Your grandfather gave my father that gift, and through him, gave it to thousands of others. The event continued with stories, photographs, and memories shared by various attendees. Mr. Thompson spoke about Robert's character and leadership. Patricia Morrison shared her brother James's letters from before he deployed, revealing a young man full of hope and dreams. Other veterans shared their own experiences and how Robert had impacted their lives after the war. By the end of the evening, what had started as a story about one inherited jacket had become a celebration of how one life, lived with intention and compassion, could create waves of positive impact that extended far beyond what anyone might imagine. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus and Jennifer approached Daniel one final time. Marcus spoke first. I've been thinking a lot about what I'm doing with my life. I inherited Grandpa's car, and I was planning to sell it and use the money for a vacation. But that seems wrong now. I want to do something meaningful with it. Like what? Daniel asked. I'm going to donate the money to veteran services. There are organizations that help former soldiers transition to civilian life, deal with trauma, find jobs. Grandpa would have liked that. Jennifer nodded. And I'm working with a local women's shelter. They need support, and I have the time and resources to help. Grandpa taught us that what we inherit comes with responsibility. I get that now. Daniel felt a surge of pride in his cousins. Grandpa would be really proud of both of you. In the months that followed, the Carter family underwent a transformation. Annual family gatherings that had once been somewhat perfunctory affairs filled with small talk became meaningful connections where family members shared stories, supported each other's challenges, and actively looked for ways to help their community. Daniel himself made significant changes to his life. He'd been drifting somewhat, working various jobs without a clear sense of purpose. Inspired by his grandfather's example and the stories of service he'd uncovered, he enrolled in a social work program, determined to dedicate his career to helping others, particularly veterans and their families. He wore the jacket often, especially when he needed to remember why he was pursuing this new path. The weight of it on his shoulders felt like his grandfather's hand, encouraging him forward. The items from the pocket he kept safe at home in a special case, but he made digital copies of the letters and photographs to share in presentations he began giving at schools and community centers about the hidden value of family stories and the importance of honoring those who served. 1 year after inheriting the jacket, Daniel received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was a book titled, The Jacket's Legacy, Stories of Service, Sacrifice, and Second Chances. It was authored by Mr. Thompson, with Daniel listed as a contributor. The book compiled the story of Robert Carter, Michael Chen, James Morrison, and dozens of other veterans whose stories of compassion and courage deserve to be remembered. Mr. Thompson had included a note. Daniel, your grandfather's story inspired me to document these accounts before they're lost to time. 50% of the proceeds from this book will go to veteran services and scholarships for medical students. The other 50% I'm putting in a trust for you to continue your education and work. Robert would want his legacy to keep growing, keep helping, keep inspiring. Thank you for honoring him the way you have. Daniel called Mr. Thompson immediately, overwhelmed with gratitude. Sir, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. You've already said everything that matters, Mr. Thompson replied. You took what could have been a painful moment of mockery and turned it into a teaching opportunity for your entire family and community. That's exactly what Robert hoped would happen. You didn't just inherit a jacket, Daniel. You inherited a mission, and you're fulfilling it beautifully. As Daniel hung up the phone, he walked to his closet and pulled out the jacket. He put it on and looked at himself in the mirror. For the first time, he truly saw what his grandfather had seen. Not just a young man, but a continuation of values and commitments that transcended generations. The jacket that his cousins had laughed at, the inheritance that had seemed worthless, had become the most valuable thing Daniel owned. Not because of its material worth, but because of what it represented and what it had taught him about family, service, sacrifice, and the kind of legacy worth leaving behind. Daniel thought about his grandfather's words from the video. The greatest inheritance we can leave isn't money or possessions but values and stories that inspire others to be better. He understood now, completely and fully. The jacket was never just a jacket. It was a question: what will you carry forward? What burdens will you refuse to put down? Whose memory will you honor through your actions? How will you ensure that sacrifices made long ago continue to mean something today? As Daniel headed out to his evening class in social work, wearing the jacket proudly, he knew the answer to those questions. He would carry forward compassion. He would refuse to put down the responsibility to help others. He would honor the memories of James Morrison, Michael Chin, and Robert Carter through a life dedicated to service. And he would ensure that their sacrifices continued to ripple outward, touching lives they'd never meet in ways they'd never imagined. The jacket's pockets might have yielded their secrets, but their message was eternal: that every life matters, every choice creates consequences that extend beyond our ability to see, and the greatest measure of a life well lived isn't what we accumulate for ourselves but what we give to others and inspire them to give in turn. And so the legacy continued, carried forward by a young man wearing his grandfather's coat, proving that sometimes the most valuable inheritances are the ones people laugh at until they understand what they really mean.